For the last 3 years, the internet has been ablaze with warnings about the Great Reset. Millions of people have spent their days scanning the horizon, waiting for the moment when the global elites would flip the switch and change the world forever. They are waiting for a declaration, a press conference, or a singular event that marks the beginning of the end. But while the world was busy fighting shadows and debating theories on social media, the architects of this new reality were quietly laying the bricks. The uncomfortable truth that New Era reveals today is that there's no coming reset. The reason you can't see it on the horizon is that you are already standing in the middle of it. The war for the future is over. The new operating system has been installed. And today, we analyze exactly how it happened without the world even noticing. The Phantom Event, misunderstanding the timeline. To understand how the world missed a transition, one must first understand the nature of modern systemic change. The public imagination often envisions historical shifts as explosive events. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the signing of a treaty, or a stock market crash. Consequently, people expected the Great Reset to be a singular, dramatic moment where private property was seized or currency was overnight into a new digital token. Because this Hollywood-style climax never arrived, many believe the danger has passed or that the plan failed. However, the reality of the 21st century is that revolution does not happen by decree. It happens by update. Much like a smartphone software update that occurs while the user sleeps, the global economic and social operating system was patched during the chaos of the early 2020s. The Great Reset was never a destination. It was a process of acceleration. It was a rapid consolidation of corporate power, the digitization of identity, and the restructuring of the social contract. By looking for a future event, the population missed the structural changes that have already calcified into permanent reality. The reset wasn't a restart button. It was a migration to a new server, and that migration is already 99% complete. The silent coup of stakeholder capitalism. The first and most critical pillar of this completed transition is a fundamental change in how global business operates. Historically, the primary duty of a corporation was to its shareholders to make a profit. This was the engine of the old capitalism. Under the guise of the Great Reset, this was replaced by stakeholder capitalism. On the surface, this sounded benevolent. Corporations caring for the environment, social causes, and governance. In practice, it was a mechanism that allowed a handful of asset managers to centralize control over the global economy. This phase is already over. The implementation of environmental, social, and governance ESG scores is not a future plan. It is the current gatekeeper capital. Today, companies that do not align with specific ideological frameworks are starved of investment, insurance, and banking services. The centralization has occurred. A small cartel of passive investment firms now holds a controlling vote in almost every major corporation on Earth. They dictate policy not through laws, which require public debate, but through corporate boardrooms, which do not. The economy has already been reset from a free market of independent actors to a managed market of compliant vassals. The small business owner waiting for the takeover missed the fact that the consolidation of wealth during the pandemic was a takeover. The infrastructure of digital compliance. The second completed pillar is the digitization of human existence. The fear of the Great Reset often centered on the idea of a tracking chip or mandatory digital ID. While people argue about extreme scenarios, the functional equivalent was voluntarily adopted by billions. The infrastructure for a global digital identity system is no longer theoretical. It is operational. During the crisis years, the population was trained to accept that access to physical spaces, travel, and employment could be conditional based on digital health status or compliance. This psychological barrier has been shattered. The QR code lifestyle became normalized. Today, in nations across the world, digital wallets that hold currency, identification, and medical data are being rolled out not as mandates, but as conveniences. The battle for privacy was lost when the population accepted that a smartphone was not a tool, but a prerequisite for participation in society. The Internet of Bodies, where biometric data is harvested and monetized, is already the business model of the largest tech companies. The reset required a population that was traceable, trackable, and data mined. That objective has been achieved. The sensors are in place, the data centers are built, and the algorithms are trained. The death of the old middle class. Perhaps the most painful reality is that the economic reset was essentially a wealth transfer designed to hollow out the middle class, and this, too, is largely finished. The old era was defined by a strong middle class that owned assets, saved in cash, and operated small independent businesses. The new era is defined by the subscription economy and the dominance of megacorporations. The inflationary spike of the last few years was not an accident. It was the mechanism of the reset. It devalued the savings of the middle class and exploded the asset prices of the ultra-wealthy. The result is a permanent bifurcated economy. The K-shaped recovery everyone spoke of was a reset in action. The top 10% of society, who own financial assets, saw their wealth multiply. The bottom 90% who rely on wages saw their purchasing power collapse. The goal of you will own nothing is being achieved not by government seizure, but by price appreciation. Housing, new vehicles, and prime assets have been pushed out of reach for the average earner, turning them into a permanent renter class. Institutional investors buying up single-family neighborhoods was the final nail in the coffin of the American dream. The transition to a neo-feudal economy, where few own everything and the rest rent everything, is not coming in 2030. It is the housing market of today. The green energy transition as a control grid. The fourth pillar is the energy transition. The narrative of the Great Reset leaned heavily on the Green New Deal and the shift away from fossil fuels. While the environmental benefits are debated publicly, the geopolitical reality is that this shift effectively centralizes energy production. In the old era, energy was decentralized. Anyone could buy a generator or store fuel. In the new era, energy is an electric grid controlled by smart meters and central authorities. This infrastructure is already built. The smart grid allows for the remote monitoring and rationing of energy usage. We have already seen demand response events where thermostats are adjusted remotely during heat waves. The illusion that this is a future dystopia blinds people to the fact that the legislation, the technology, and the corporate commitments are already signed. The internal combustion engine, a symbol of autonomy and freedom of movement, is being legislated out of existence. The reset of the energy sector was about moving from energy abundance to managed energy scarcity, where consumption is a privilege that can be toggled on or off. That control grid is live today. The psychological conditioning of the crisis. Finally, the psychological component of the Great Reset is complete. The objective was to shift the public mindset from one of liberty and risk to one of safety and compliance. For decades, the Western world valued freedom above security. The events of the early 2020s successfully inverted this hierarchy. The population has been conditioned to look to central authorities and experts for permission to live their lives. The threshold for what the public will accept, lockdowns, censorship, debanking, and travel restrictions, has been permanently lowered. Why no one noticed? The boiled frog effect. Why, then, do so many people still believe the Great Reset is a future threat? It is due to the boiled frog effect. If the changes had happened overnight, if the currency had been canceled on a Tuesday and the digital ID mandated on a Wednesday, there would have been riots. But because it happened incrementally, masked by crises and branded as innovation or safety, the human mind normalized it. Humans are incredibly adaptable creatures. We adapt to inflation. We adapt to surveillance. We adapt to censorship. The architects of this new era counted on this adaptability. They knew that if they changed the definitions of words, changed the terms of service, and changed the interest rates slowly enough, the population would simply adjust their expectations. The Great Reset was successful because it was boring. It was buried in bureaucratic PDFs, user agreements, and complex financial instruments. It didn't look like a villain in a movie. It looked like a software update and a price hike.